Today we're diving into Charlie Parker's solo on Donna Lee. We have a full PDF transcription so you can follow along. We're going to take a look at 3 licks and 3 lesson takeaways from his playing. Hi and welcome to the Saxophone Academy. If you're new here, I do hope you consider subscribing. It's a fun group of people. A little strange, but fun nonetheless. We talk about saxophone fundamentals and playing and jazz language and classical as well. Now today we are talking about Donna Lee, specifically Charlie Parker's solo, his first chorus solo on Donna Lee. Now, it's important to note, especially when we're learning tunes, that we know if there's an original song. Now, Donna Lee, here's a pedagogical There's supposed to be a graphic. No budget. Imagine there's a graphic that said Pedagogical Moment. Now, Donna Lee is a contrafact, and a contrafact is a new composition written over an existing set of chord changes. In this case, the tune, Donna Lee, was written over the song, Back Home Again in Indiana. Now, another pedagogical... pretend again there was a graphic, Pedagogical Moment. A song has lyrics and is meant to be sung. Back Home Again in Indiana is a song, and learning that song can be greatly helpful in keeping your place and learning the chord changes to Donna Lee. Donna Lee is not meant to be sung, though some people try, and that is a tune. So I've picked 3 licks, or I prefer to use the term phrases, from Charlie Parker's solo. Again, this is coming from his first chorus. You can download the full transcription in the comment description. There's a link somewhere down there to follow along in his solo. So without further ado, let's jump into the first phrase that we're studying, and it comes from the bars 5 through 8 of his solo, Charlie Parker playing over a 2-5-1. Now, just to refresh everyone's memory, we call it a 2-5-1 progression because the chords here, this G minor and C7, C dominant 7 chords, are built off the 2nd and 5th scale degrees of the key. And that's important because, to note, it's all built in the home key of F major. We're in the key of F major here on alto saxophone. Concert A flat would be B flat for tenor saxophone. So this G minor chord and the C7 chord are just built diatonically or in the key if we just stack triads or skip every other note, starting on the 2nd scale degree, G, and the 5th, C. So I want you to know this is all operating in the home key of F. But you'll notice in this phrase there are many notes that are not diatonic or not within the key. So let's listen again more slowly and take a listen for which notes aren't in the key of F major. Now, it is much easier to find the non-diatonic notes if you do hit the like button in 3, 2, 1. That's the stuff. Okay, so looking at the notes that don't fit in the key, we largely see a chromatic motion down, and this is nearly ubiquitous in bebop. Now, at this point, you might be tempted to give this collection of notes a name. It's completely common. We have to form patterns as human beings. It's critical to our survival as a species. Notice patterns. That snake bitey bitey, that snake tasty tasty. Patterns are important to human beings. But here, I think it's not so important to see the pattern, but the general motion. We see this collection of notes, and we want to call it a certain type of scale. It's not exactly a bebop scale. I hate that term. It's not exactly a chromatic scale, but just take a look at the shape and notice which notes are doing what. Chromatic descend, one tiny little leap in motion, no big deal. So listen again and notice the shape, specifically the leaps up, this burst, this flurry of motion that we love so much in Charlie Parker's playing. It's just diatonic thirds. It's stacked up and then chromatic descent. Listen one more time and just pay attention to the shape of the phrase. Now, interesting factoid, if you practice your major scale in the diatonic sevenths, which are in our free fundamentals book, I'll put a link down to that as well. The diatonic sevenths are all in there. If you do that homework, this is going to feel very good under the fingers, and also if you know your chromatic scale. So, in truth, I had never transcribed this solo before until last month. I'm working on this with my students, and some of these licks just fell so easily under the fingers, because, I mean, I have studied Charlie Parker before, but because I know my diatonic seventh. So when we have this 2-chord, this arpeggiation up, having done my homework with arpeggios and diatonic 7 patterns, it's just there all along, and it will be for you too, which is why we not only have to address specific language, learning the shapes and the interesting notes of Charlie Parker, but we also have to have a fundamental bedrock of technique that helps us hear it and implement it as well. So, big takeaway from this as well is learn your diatonic sevenths, and these stacking trads, these arpeggiation flurries, which are just ubiquitous again in bebop, will fall beautifully under the fingers. So your homework, take a look at this, notice the shape of it, this ascending stacked triads, these diatonic seventh chords, and learn them in a couple of the keys and practice the shape in a few adjacent or comfortable keys for you. All 12, you might ask? We'll talk about that in your homework and future application at the end of this video. Next up, let's take a look at when the tune moves to the relative minor. First, let's just hear the phrase that Charlie Parker plays. Now here we are in the key of D minor, the relative minor of F major. Now how do we know this? Well, we're set up here by a minor 2-5. Don't get overwhelmed. We see this half diminished chord. You can tell it by the flat 5 and this dominant chord with the alternate to the flat 9. It looks very complex, but it's not. It's just D minor, and it's very simple if you know, and here's the big takeaway from lick number 2 from Charlie Parker, if you know your harmonic minor scale. The harmonic minor scale, as my mentor would say, is the major scale of minor scales, meaning there's a million forms of minor scales. There's books and treatises written over them, altering them, and when to use them in half steps away from the key and the chord. Don't get confused. If you know your harmonic minor scales, you know the material to build minor key areas. And if you know your harmonic minor scales, you automatically then know the 2 and 5, especially if you do your diatonic sevenths, which are again are in the fundamental books. So I want you to listen to this again and realize this beautiful lick that sounds kind of complex because we have the home key of F major in our ear, but we're in D minor and using the D harmonic minor scale. That's all the notes in this pitch collection right here. It sounds very hip and rather complex, but it's all D harmonic minor. Listen again a little bit more slowly. So the big takeaway lesson here is learn your harmonic minor scales. Learn them slowly and progressively. You don't need to learn all 12 in 1 week. Don't try to do that. And then if you're working on a tune, do that tune's harmonic minor scale. For instance, if you're doing what is this thing called Love on alto saxophone, that's D minor right at the outset. We have a minor 2-5 in D minor on alto saxophone. So by learning this, you're learning so many other tunes in the Great American Songbook. So learn your harmonic minor scales. Then if you learn the diatonic seventh exercises out of our fundamentals book, you're going to be able to play those 2-5s, those minor 2-5s without a second thought. They're going to fall beautifully under the fingers. Now, the third phrase we're looking at comes from the final 4 bars of the form on Charlie Parker solo. It's called the turnaround. Every now and then it gets a little bit lonely and you're never coming around. You're my total eclipse of the heart. So the turnaround, there's several different types of turnaround. This is an incredibly common set of chords. In this case, it's a 3-6-2-5-1. Now, I don't want you to get too hung up, but there is a dominant chord right here that is not diatonic to the key. If we look at the original lead sheet, especially of Back Home Again in Indiana, or a lot of the original Tin Pan Alley tunes, the 3-6-2-5 is going to be diatonic, just built off the home key. Here we have kind of what's a secondary dominant, creates a little bit more tension, but you will notice that the notes right here, that would be an F sharp. Charlie Parker doesn't even play that. The turnaround is a way of getting back home. And this lick that Charlie Parker is playing right here, this phrase is just very clearly cadencing, coming back home to F major. Take a listen. So quite often in bebop and modern jazz, when we have a 3-6-2-5 or this turnaround, players will often outline these chords, alternating motions, arpeggiations with some interesting alterations. But here, Charlie Parker's, no, we're just ending the solo in F. We hear that cadence of the leading tone E to F, E to F. That's what our ears really pick up again. Listen again, this time a little bit slower, and see if you can hear that ending on E to F, that cadencing on F. Now, let's listen to it again at full speed, and here I also want you to notice the repetition. Specifically, how it's a repeated phrase, but notice where the repetition happens. Is it at the same place or different? Listen again. And you'll notice the first time this happens, the landing point of F happens on beat 3. The next time it happens on beat 2. And then the pickup leading on, it happens again on beat 4. Kind of what we have here is a macro-cadential hemiola figure. That's a real thing. Don't look it up, but it's a real thing. So what we have here is an interesting rhythmic phrase, but also some displacement, creating kind of a large-scale syncopation. It's incredibly fascinating. Listen again a little bit slower and notice where that landing point hits in the different measures. Now, homework going forward. What do we do with these phrases? Well, I highly recommend you get some transcription software. I really like Transcribe Plus. I just had a great Zoom chat with their creator. I'll be doing a video on that, showing how I use it and why I like that. AnyTune, Amazing Slowdowner. There's lots of great software. I don't have a horse in this game. No one's paying me for any of this. So use whatever you want, but slow these down, because here's another important, I said a lot of things are important in this video, granted. There can only be one priority. Truly, by definition of the word, you can't have a second or third priority. The true priority here is the style. So yes, you have the written transcription, you have this PDF, it could be a lot of fun. None of this matters a hill of beans. That's a dumb phrase. It doesn't matter unless you have the style. The style in the feel is everything. So what I want you to do is take the solo. I highly recommend you just pay 99 cents for the MP3 so you can stick it in your favorite slowdowner software, and then loop these phrases and get the articulation, the style, the inflection. That first 2-5 is a series of notes. If you just play them as a series of notes, it's not very interesting. It's not very fun. It's the emphasis on the goal notes and the inflection and the ghosting that we could talk about till we're blue in the face, but the English language just doesn't have the words to get to the magic of what that style is, that interesting rhythmic drive and inflection. So slow it down with your transcription software and get the accents, the articulation, the style, because it's truly the most important thing. Then, once you have it down with good style, should we put it in 12 keys? I don't think so. Look, it's 2024. Some people tell you, learn it in 12 keys and get in the shed. None of us have sheds. We are using a spare bedroom or bonus rooms in our suburban houses. Let's just be honest here. So in 2024, jazz is no longer a popular art form. It's not a job. It's a hobby and can be a great thing to do to spend your life on Instagram if you're a trust fund baby. So let's not ruin a perfectly good hobby by having a whole lot of rules that we have to learn every Charlie Parker lick in 12 keys. We do not. I want you to take a look at the shape, the ideas, the motion. For instance, in this first phrase, we took a look at this 2-5. This ascending arpeggiation, the stacking thirds, and chromatic motion down. Maybe notice this. What chord tone does it start on? Notice the shape and put it in a couple of other comfortable keys. If you have time and you're in jazz school, I don't know why you're watching this video then, great, put it in 12 keys. But for the rest of us, we don't have to know everything in all 12 keys. And if that G flat 2-5 comes around and we have to do it, well then, great. We'll do the practicing, the shedding, the bonus rooming, as we should call it here in 2024. Then don't ruin a perfectly good hobby with these make-believe rules as if we're living the 1950s. We're not. Have fun. Use it in a useful sense of what you're going to apply it to in your own practice and study. So a couple of related keys, you can get a lot of great benefit from learning these phrases. But also remember, this should be fun. I want you to take these shapes, these ideas, and experiment. Start them on different notes, start them on different parts of the beats, try them in new keys, and have fun. Be a scientist. Experiment. Don't hold your ego and your self-esteem to the results. A scientist simply looks at the results and says, interesting, and maybe makes a note. I don't know. I've never really done science. But I imagine we should be mad professors where we're looking and experimenting and noticing the results and changing our approach, the parameters of our experimentation. So have fun. I will see you next week. We're going to be on a regular release schedule now from here going on out. Next week, we're going to talk about rhythmic hacking, how to take some incredibly fast, difficult figures and make them much, much easier. It's not a trick. It's a time-honored method. I've just given it a cool name that we'll talk about next week. In the meantime, have a good time with these, do your homework, and go practice.